Now, in our agenda, we're going to take a look at advertising spending and spending by medium. And this gives you trend of total spending. As you look from left to right, we go from 2011 to 2017. And the x-axis, the one that goes up and down, vertical axis is billions of dollars. So we're going from 155 billion to 183 billion. So that's how much is spent on advertising in the United States in total across all media types. This, by the way, is worldwide. And so from 2014 and projected 2020, 2021. So it goes from 488 billion in 2014 up to 750 plus billion in 2021. So now this is spending by medium in the U.S. We're back to U.S. only now. We're not looking at total spending, but we're looking at spending by media type. And we've got the 2017 numbers in blue, and then a projection for 2021 is the darker bar on the right. And this is in billions of dollars. So we see internet spending, which includes mobile, going from 86.4 billion up to 116. So clearly the highest growth, not surprisingly, is coming from internet. And this is now kind of getting us ready to think about trends and sort of what's going on with all of these media that we've been talking about. TV goes up a little bit. Radio goes up a little bit. Newspapers going down. Magazines basically flat. Out-of-home's going up a little bit. And then they have a couple of other things here. Cinema really should be included in out-of-home, but anyway, I won't quibble. The most dramatic growth is internet, and then you've got print going down. So now let's sort of go in and focus on something specific that we all know about it, and talk about the Super Bowl as a media property. So this chart shows the years from 1967 through 2017 and 18, and it shows average viewership in millions of people. So it goes from 50 million up to over 100, 110 million. It goes up and down. And that's, of course, going to be based on the teams playing and how they merchandise it and things like that. So the Super Bowl is the most watched single program in the U.S. And when you look at the U.S. population, which is 300 and something million, you see that like a third of U.S. population is watching the Super Bowl. Biggest draw in sports, and this is last year's game. It got a 47.7 overnight rating. That means it reached over about half of households. And it'll go up quarter by quarter. People switch off and on and look at other things. If the game gets bad, they'll turn off. So as you think of the Super Bowl, it's not just one block of time, right? It's an event. And if your ad runs at the end of the game, that's where they placed you. That's your positioning for your 30-second ad. And it's a bad game and you lose a third of your audience, it's too bad. But typically the network will guarantee a certain audience as part of your contract. And if you don't get it, they will give you make goods, meaning they'll run you another programming. Hopefully it reaches your target so that you get what delivery you were guaranteed. Anybody know what the cost of the Super Bowl spot was last year? $5.4 million for a 30-second spot. So and remember, all advertising is to reach new customers. Super Bowl reaches half the household. It's not real targeted thing. But there's so much talk about the Super Bowl ads. Being on the Super Bowl kind of says something about your company. It's like having an ad in Times Square. It sort of says you've arrived. So there are lots of sort of value to this expensive Super Bowl spot. But boy, that's a lot of money. What are the most watched television broadcasts of all time worldwide? So on the left here, you have dates. Then you have the programming. You have estimated audience in billions. And you have the content on the right. And it's almost all sports content. Not too surprising, is it? You've got the Olympics with huge 3.6 billion people in the audience. And you've got, a little farther down, you've got World Cup. Look up the viewership of the latest women's World Cup final. Why don't you? And maybe I'll ask you about that. All right, so now we've looked at media spending. We've looked at a specific program that some of the biggest rated programs are on TV. We talked about the Super Bowl. And now we're back to this issue of CPMs. And remember, we have been saying that cost per thousand impressions is a way to differentiate among media types. Some are expensive and some are less expensive. And so what you see here is their dollars on the left, media types along the bottom. And one of the most expensive in terms of a CPM with over $30 cost per thousand impressions is Spot TV, prime time. You don't know what Spot TV is yet, probably. But Spot TV is when you buy a TV station in a local market. You don't buy the whole network and cover the whole country. You're going in and buying in St. Louis, you're buying the ABC affiliate, and you're only running in St. Louis. That's Spot TV. You're just in the spot. Very expensive CPM. Also, newspapers, very expensive CPM. That's for a full-page ad. And you can get cheaper CPMs if you buy smaller ads. And then you see mobile, display, and the internet having very low CPMs. This is a chart that you should look at. You should understand what media types are expensive and what aren't in terms of cost per thousand impressions. And then you have to ask yourself, why are some so expensive and some so cheap? And that, of course, is where we get to quality of impression. 10-second radio ad doesn't have the persuasive power of a full-page newspaper ad necessarily. So we have sight, sound, motion are part of what differentiate quality of impression. Depth of sale is length, time spent with the ad. A long infomercial for Snuggies versus a 30-second ad. The more time I have, the more I can persuade you. Just as with the Tide, the print ad or the first banner ad we saw, and then going to the website and seeing, I think it was 6 different banners talking about different aspects of what Tide offers. And then if I click and get more information, I find out even more. And I eventually even get an offer for the new dry cleaning service. Who knew they had that? That's depth of sale. I spend a lot of time with Tide on that website if I want to. When I'm sitting in a subway car, as I know a lot of you do every day, if I look at whether there's just one ad for a product versus a whole side of a subway car. Okay, I spend more time looking at the whole side of the subway car than I do the one ad. Measurability is, the internet is the ultimate measurable medium. It's kind of made other media have to dance to the same tune and try to be more measurable for advertisers. So that has an impact. Of course, internet's got a low CPM even though it's so measurable. Why is that? Well, we'll talk about that more a little later in the class. And avoidability is another one for you to think about. Out of home, even though it's normally just one poster, one image, and if it's on a highway, you drive by it and you may only look at it for 3 or 4 seconds. That's not a lot of depth of sale, right? You don't have time for a big long story there or a bunch of pictures. If you try any of that, you're going to have a very ineffective ad no one's even going to want to bother looking at. But you can't miss the out of home. If it's a real eye burner, as we used to call them, if it's right there on the right hand side and it's close to the road and it's facing you, you can't avoid it. Okay, so when you walk here to FIT and you walk uptown on 7th Avenue, you go by a bus shelter or two. Well, you can't avoid it. You can't blank it out. I mean, it's there, you know. So out of home is unavoidable. So out of home is the least avoidable media type. It's unavoidable. I would argue that things like print and big magazines, big Vogue magazines, it might be pretty easy to avoid some of the ads and things like that. Okay. We're now going to stop this section, and we'll have one more quick one to do.